In today's farm report, mastitis management is just as important in the winter as it is in the summer. Emily Wilmis with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some tips on how to prevent mastitis and frozen teats in extreme cold weather.
A lot of people, me included, think about mastitis management mostly in the summer. After all, that's when we see the highest prevalence of it. However, we see mastitis every month of the year. It may not be on the top of the priority list during winter, but it should be on the list nonetheless. You already know about all of the health and economic impacts of mastitis, so why jeopardize your cows and your bottom line? You probably still use your typical mastitis routine, dry treatment, monitoring fresh cows, keeping stalls clean, and the like. However, are you managing for the specific threats and stressors that only winter brings? First, we know it's cold. Well, it's usually cold. And when it's cold, make sure your cows have access to shelter and an ample amount of clean, dry bedding. Like with any season, the ultimate goal is to keep the amount of stress on your cows low. Making sure your cows are properly sheltered and that barns have adequate ventilation will help keep them comfortable and will prevent them from needing to use extra energy to keep warm. Cows can handle fairly cold temperatures. Wind chills are what really bother cows and make them use extra energy. At the very least, keep your cows out of the wind. Providing clean, dry bedding is always on the top of my list for proper management. It's especially important in the winter that cows are kept dry and clean. If they enter the parlor with a particularly dirty udder, it will require more washing. If the udder is not properly dried, there is a risk of frostbite. Long hair can also make udders difficult to keep clean and dry. If you don't already, consider singeing or clipping udders. On the subject of udders and teats, teat dip can also put your cows at risk for frostbite. Of course, you need to dip your cows, so what can you do? My extension colleague Chuck Schwartow put it best: dip but don't drip. If I could rewrite that line, I would say dip but don't drip or skip. When the weather is freezing and the winds are howling with below 20 wind chills, you may be tempted to not post-dip your cows. But even in the winter, don't skip it. The post-dip is too important to leave out, but the way you manage post-dipping in the winter can be tweaked a bit. You might recall that optimum contact time for pre-dip is 30 seconds. After those 30 seconds, the dip can be wiped off to continue the milk prep routine. Similarly, a strategy you could implement is to put post-dip on for a 30-second contact time, then dry teats before sending cows out of the parlor. You will get the protection of the post-dip, but you won't run the risk of frostbitten teats. This practice will add some time to milking, but it only needs to be implemented in the extreme cold weather. This winter, keep your cows out of the elements and clean and dry in order to continue combating mastitis all year round. This is Emily Wilmis with University of Minnesota Extension.
In the first part of today's farm report, nutrition is important every day of the year, even more so in cold winter months. Emily Wilmis with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some tips on how to maintain proper nutrition for your animals.
Proper nutrition during the winter months is crucial for all livestock, including beef cattle. It's estimated that winter feed makes up more than half of the annual cost of keeping a beef cow. Let's talk about some best practices for feeding your cattle in the winter months and how you can minimize costs. Energy requirements increase in the winter, so before you think about energy-dense feed, think about what you can do to decrease those needs as much as possible. The energy requirement of beef cattle increases about 3% for each degree that the wind chill is below 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and increases even further in wet conditions. Make sure you are providing your cattle protection from the wind and precipitation to help reduce their energy requirement. High-quality hay is a great source of energy for your cattle. Intakes will increase in the winter, so purchasing and storing high-quality hay is crucial. To ensure adequate nutrition, have your hay sent in for forage analysis. Match animal nutrition requirements to the quality of your forage. For example, heifers and thin cows require a more energy-dense diet compared to older or fleshy cows. Sorting animals into groups based on body condition allows you to feed the available forage more effectively. To help reduce hay losses, there are several things you can do, starting with storage. Hay stored outside usually has more spoilage during storage and lower palatability than hay stored inside. The best way to prevent losses from storage is to store all hay in a barn or shed. If that is not possible, the next best options, according to University of Tennessee research, are net wrapping your bales or storing them covered on tires. On top of poor storage, improper feeding practices can also waste hay. To minimize waste, feed hay in small amounts or in a feeder. When fed a limited amount of hay at a time, cattle have less opportunity to trample and soil the hay. Also consider feeding hay in well-drained areas, as keeping hay dry also reduces waste. If you intend to feed hay in a single location all winter, provide a footing such as crushed gravel or concrete to help minimize mud. It may be more cost-effective to move hay feeding areas around the farm to minimize the damage to any one area of the pasture. Lastly, if you have some hay stored indoors and some outdoors, feed the hay stored outside first. Following these suggestions will help ensure proper winter nutrition, reduced winter feed costs, and maximize feed value. If you have any additional questions about winter feeding, you can call me at the Stearns County Extension Office at 320-255-6169. This is Emily Wilmus with University of Minnesota Extension.
More farm news after this, and online anytime at fallsradio.com.